If someone had ever told me that one day, I'd be standing in the middle of my brother's wedding rehearsal, and that his fiancée would look at me with admiration and call me Your Honor, I would have laughed. Not because I didn't dream of something like that, but because I never believed a dream like that could ever touch my life. I used to be the one my family rejected. The one my brother once called the disgrace of this family. The one my mother cut off completely, just because I dared to do what was right. And yet, that night, under the warm golden lights, surrounded by rows of white-covered chairs and the laughter of family and friends from the groom's side, I was the one who made the entire room fall silent. And it all started with one unexpected question. "Excuse me, are you Judge Olivia?" "My name is Olivia Grant. I'm 34 years old, born and raised in Georgia in what outsiders always thought was the perfect family. My father is a retired military officer, my mother a former high school teacher, and my older brother, Jason, is the lead engineer at a major tech company in Atlanta. Growing up, I lived in Jason's massive shadow. Handsome, talented, loved by everyone. I was different. Frizzy curls, darker skin than the rest of my family, and always the kid who asked too many questions. Since middle school, I'd wanted to become a lawyer. Not because anyone inspired me, but because I once watched a friend get forced to take the blame for a prank he didn't do. I've hated injustice ever since. But my family never really respected that dream. My mom would say, "What kind of man wants to marry a girl who argues for a living?" My dad just gave a dry chuckle. "Jason makes money building things. You want to go around arguing in court over nonsense." Still, I was determined to get into the University of Georgia's law program. The early years of college weren't easy. I worked 2 part-time jobs to pay my way, since my parents didn't support me the way they had supported Jason. Even so, I kept going, until that one fateful year when I reported a professor for harassing female students. I thought I was doing the right thing. I never expected how fast everything would turn against me. The university launched an internal investigation. That professor had powerful connections. A week later, I was suspended for violating the school's code of conduct. I came home in tears, hoping for a hug from my mom. But all she said was, "Are you doing this for attention? Jason's never caused problems like you." I remember that night clearly. Jason standing in the living room, arms crossed, eyes cold. He looked me up and down and said, "You're the disgrace of this family, Olivia." I didn't say anything. I just walked out of the house I grew up in, walked like I had no right to ever come back. And the truth is, for years I didn't. Not until that one fateful day, when a friend invited me to tag along to Jason's wedding rehearsal. I only planned to sit quietly in the back, have a bite of cake, and slip away. But then, Jason's fiancée, walked over, eyes glowing. "You're Judge Olivia Grant, right? I watched one of your court sessions. I admire you so much." I stood frozen for a few seconds, unable to react to the girl's unexpected question. Jason's fiancée. She had a bright face, her blonde hair neatly pinned at the nape of her neck, and her ocean blue eyes lit up with excitement at the mention of the name, Judge Olivia. I had never met her before, but from that look, I knew she wasn't pretending. "I study law at Columbia," she said quickly. "I watched the video of the Greenlight fraud trial last year. The way you handled the rules of evidence was incredible." I smiled politely, thanking her, though I was still taken aback. Jason was standing not far away. He was talking to my father, but his eyes never left me. That look hadn't changed since the last night I was still part of the family. I stepped aside, planning to quietly leave the crowd, when my mother appeared. She was wearing a navy blue dress, tasteful in style, lips tightly pressed together. She didn't hug me, didn't ask how I'd been. Just gave a slight nod like I was a coworker, not her daughter. "What are you doing here?" she asked, low enough so only the two of us could hear. I swallowed that all-too-familiar feeling. I was never the one they were glad to see. "Tina, Jason's fiancée, invited me," I replied. My mother glanced toward the young woman chatting animatedly with a group of her friends. She said nothing more, just turned and walked away, leaving behind a faint lavender scent, like all those times I was left alone in that small room as a child. I remembered. That day I stood in front of my parents after being suspended for reporting Professor Parks. I still had the disciplinary letter in my hand, trembling as I read each line, hoping someone would defend me. But all I got was Jason's cold judgment, my father's disappointed headshake, and my mother's pitiful stare. No one asked what the professor had done. No one asked if I was okay. They only saw the result. I was suspended. I caused trouble. I brought shame to the family. I left the Grant household with a suitcase and unpaid tuition debt. I was 23. I remember sleeping the first 3 nights in my old Honda, parked behind a church near campus. I woke up each morning to fogged-up windows and one thought in my head: I will not break here. I worked nights as a diner waitress, then took a daytime data entry job at an insurance firm. Some weeks I slept less than 20 hours, but I still retook the suspended class, finished my degree, and earned my law license. No one in my family knew about any of it. I stopped writing letters, stopped calling, stopped posting on social media. They didn't want me in their lives, and I respected that. Then one day, I got hired as a judicial clerk for Judge Elaine Maddox, a stern but fair woman who rekindled the fire in me. She believed in me, trained me, pushed me beyond my limits, and when she retired, I was nominated to succeed her at the Fulton County Court. The first time I put on that black robe and walked into the courtroom as a judge, I thought about calling my mother. I picked up the phone, my finger hovering over her name in my contacts, then set it down. I didn't know what I even wanted to hear. A late congratulations. An apology. All I knew was, I was no longer the girl who got expelled. No longer the disgrace. And now, at the wedding rehearsal of the very man who once humiliated me in front of the entire family, I was being addressed by the title I had fought my entire life to earn. Judge. Tina, the fiancée, was still there, telling me she had written her graduation thesis based on a case I'd presided over. I saw Jason walking toward us, his face barely hiding his irritation. "What are you doing here?" he asked, no effort to hide the disdain in his voice. I didn't respond right away. I just looked at him, the man who once stood in that living room and called me the disgrace. But this time I didn't lower my head. I will never forget those first days after leaving the Grant household, or the feeling I had when I saw my name for the first time on the lease of a tiny apartment in South Atlanta. It had just one room, low ceilings, and creaky wooden floors, but to me at that moment, it was a fortress of freedom. I was no longer sleeping in my car, no longer hiding my face at work, no longer feeling like I was nothing. I worked like crazy, almost without a single day off. By day I did insurance claim data entry, a dull job but it paid on time. At night, I was still waitressing at a 24-hour diner. I studied during breaks, listened to old law lectures on my phone while doing dishes or riding the bus. There were nights I ate instant noodles and fell asleep right at my desk. But quitting never crossed my mind. I didn't need anyone to believe in me anymore. Believing in myself was enough. 2 years after my suspension, I filed an academic appeal and was granted permission to return. This time I didn't just return. I came back at the top of my class. I didn't waste a minute. I gave myself no excuse to falter. I remember the day I graduated. There was no family waiting outside the gate. No flowers. No applause. Just me, in an old rented gown, holding up my phone to take a selfie. I posted it on LinkedIn with only one line: "Just getting started." That photo happened to be seen by a female judge. Her name was Elaine Maddox, the first woman to serve as chief judge in Fulton County. 1 week later, I got an invitation to interview for a judicial clerkship in her chambers. I showed up in a gray dress with frayed hems, clutching a folder I had prepared all night. I thought I'd be rejected. Who would hire a girl with no pedigree, no connections, nothing but grit? But Judge Maddox looked at me for a long moment, then said, "Do you know why I invited you here? Because I saw hunger, not for food but for justice." From that day on, she became my mentor, my teacher, and at times, the mother I never had. She sharpened me relentlessly, made me read every statute 3 times, write case briefs in just 3 sentences. I cried in the bathroom once after being corrected in front of the panel during a hearing. But I came back the next morning. She didn't just teach me how to practice law. She taught me how to stand tall, whether facing criticism or cruelty. At 31, I was nominated for the position of magistrate judge for Fulton County. I sat in Judge Maddox's old office for nearly an hour, my hand resting on the book she had left me when she retired. Justice is earned, not inherited. When I first put on the black robe and stepped onto the bench, I saw in my mind the image of that 23-year-old girl walking away from home in tears, clutching a suitcase. I was no longer that girl. I was Judge Olivia Grant. And now I was standing at Jason's wedding rehearsal, face to face with a man who had mocked, belittled, and dismissed my worth for most of my youth. "What are you doing here?" His voice cut through the air, like we weren't surrounded by relatives, friends, and his future bride. I was about to respond, but Tina, Jason's fiancée, turned to him before I could. "I invited her. You never told me Judge Olivia was your sister." Jason flinched slightly. He glanced at me, then looked away. Tina went on. "She's the one who inspired me to study law, Jason. If it weren't for what she's done, I might never have had the courage to apply to Columbia." No one said anything. For a moment, the silence was tight like a drawn string. I could hear my own heartbeat, not from anger but from something even greater. I had moved beyond them. The atmosphere in the reception hall suddenly turned heavy. Jason's soon-to-be wife, Tina, was still looking at him, her eyes filled with unmistakable disappointment. "You never said anything about Olivia," she repeated, her voice softer this time but clearer. "You never told me she's a judge. Never told me she's your sister." Jason nervously licked his lips, his eyes darting around the room. No one said a word. A few relatives had begun to notice the tension, whispering quietly among themselves. I stood still, my hands gently clasped in front of me as if steadying my breath, though it was obvious who was truly losing control of the situation. It wasn't me. It was him. "Don't be fooled by her appearance," Jason said, forcing a weak smile. "She's good at building a public image. You don't know the real story behind it." Tina looked straight at him, and for the first time, her eyes were no longer gentle. "What story?" "She's defended victims in the landmark securities case. She was nominated for the state's Judicial Integrity Program. If you've got something to say, then say it." I could feel the weight of every gaze landing on me. A few of Jason's friends started avoiding eye contact. My mother, standing across the room, kept her usual stance, silent, distant, uninvolved, as if staying quiet meant she didn't have to take sides. I hadn't come here to stir up drama. But clearly, I didn't have to do anything. The truth was unraveling on its own. An older woman, I recognized her as Aunt Sylvia, my mom's younger sister, walked up to me with a glass of white wine in hand. She smiled somewhat awkwardly. "Olivia, it's been so long. I didn't know you'd become a judge." He nodded. "Yes, ma'am. I'm honestly surprised. I always thought you were off somewhere out of state, doing some kind of legal work." "I'm still in Georgia. My office is in downtown Atlanta." She paused briefly, then chuckled to cover the silence. "Ah, Atlanta. Big city. Must be busy, huh?" I didn't blame her. That's how my family had always been. If something didn't fit their narrative, they just acted like it didn't exist. Jason was standing still, his hand gripping a beer glass, his jaw tight. For the first time in my life, I saw him flustered. Not because I had embarrassed him, but because he couldn't control the situation. Tina turned back to me, her voice sincere. "Judge Olivia, I know today can't have been easy, but I truly appreciate you being here. I think he needs to face the past himself. He can't keep hiding it." I looked into her eyes, and for a moment I realized she wasn't like my family. She heard me. He saw me. Not the title. Not the resume. He saw me. "Thank you, Tina," I said. "I didn't come here to reopen old wounds. I came to wish you happiness." Tina smiled genuinely. Jason said nothing. He just set his beer down on the table and walked off, shoulders tense, that familiar posture he had whenever he felt exposed. I stayed a little longer, just enough time for a few people to come over and strike up conversations. Some asked about my work, others about what it's like to preside over a courtroom. A man about my father's age, an old family friend, came over and shook my hand firmly. "Olivia, you've done something not everyone in this family is brave enough to do. You've earned people's respect by being yourself." I nodded and thanked him. Then I left before the meal began. I didn't need to stay and watch my family scramble to handle the situation. I walked out of the banquet hall, heading toward the parking lot as the sunset dipped behind the trees. Tina jogged after me for a bit and gently placed her hand on mine. "You'll come to the wedding, right?" she asked. "Not for them. For me." I looked at her. Didn't promise, didn't refuse. I just smiled. Awfully. I left the wedding rehearsal that day with a feeling I couldn't quite name. It wasn't anger. And it didn't exactly feel like victory. It was more like standing on top of a mountain after a long, grueling climb, looking back at the path you took, and realizing how small it looks now. My family once made me feel worthless. Every word, every judgmental glance, every cold silence was like a knife that chipped away pieces of my youth. But now, as I walked out of that room with strangers' respect while they stood in uneasy silence, I finally understood something. I was never the disgrace. They were simply never brave enough to face the truth. 2 weeks later, I received a wedding invitation. Embossed, thick paper, delivered to the courthouse, addressed formally. "Judge Olivia Grant is cordially invited." There was no handwritten note. No personal message. Just a formal, proper invitation. Probably from Tina. Jason. Definitely not. I thought about it for a few days before deciding to go. Not because I wanted reconciliation. I wasn't there to reclaim their approval. I no longer needed it. I went because I wanted the young woman entering Jason's life to know she wasn't alone. The wedding was held at a luxury lakeside resort in North Georgia. Beautiful sunlight. Romantic setting. Guests dressed to the nines. A string quartet played soft melodies on the lawn. I arrived on time. Simple black dress, hair in a low bun, no jewelry, nothing flashy. But as I stepped out of the car, one of the greeters recognized me and quickly bowed slightly. "Welcome, Judge Grant. It's an honor to have you here." Just one sentence. But in an instant a few heads turned. Their expressions shifted. There were whispers. They recognized me, not as Jason's sister, but as someone with stature, someone who mattered. I spotted my uncle, Russell, my father's older brother, standing by the drink station. He nodded politely, then walked over to shake my hand. "Olivia, you've really grown into yourself. I heard you're a county judge now." He nodded. He smiled. "Good for you. I think. The whole family probably needs to rethink how we saw you." I didn't say anything. There was no need to revisit what they once thought. What mattered was how they saw me now, and it was different. The ceremony started on time. Tina walked out in a classic white gown, elegant, poised. Jason stood beside her, still as handsome as ever, but his eyes no longer held that old spark of pride. When our eyes met, he looked away. I didn't blame him. Sometimes the clearest mirror is the person you tried hardest to bury. After the ceremony, the reception took place in a large glass house overlooking the lake. I stood off to the side, sipping red wine, chatting with a young attorney from Augusta. Then Tina appeared beside me, while Jason was still surrounded by his groomsmen. "You came. I'm really glad," she whispered. During the ceremony, my mom sat next to me and asked who you were. When I told her you were Judge Olivia, my sister-in-law, she said, "That woman carries a different kind of presence." Smiled. "Thank you for the invitation. And for seeing me, when my own family once turned their backs." Tina held my hand gently, gave it a light squeeze. "I don't believe in prejudice. Believe in truth. And you're living proof of that." A little later, Jason walked past and paused in front of me. He looked straight into my eyes. "Thanks for coming," he said, his voice noticeably lower. No arrogance, no condescension, just acceptance maybe. I gave a small nod. Then he turned away, taking Tina's hand as they stepped onto the dance floor. I left the reception just as the sky turned dusky. A few guests walked me to my car, some of them people I didn't even know, but they had heard my name somewhere. They called me Your Honor, shook my hand, asked for photos. No one called me Jason's sister. No one brought up the past. For the first time in years I felt at peace. Not because I'd been acknowledged, but because I was no longer bound by the rejection of my own blood. I didn't look back as the car pulled away from the lakeside resort. I had shown up, I had witnessed, and I had left as someone completely different from the girl who once stood crying on her own doorstep, waiting for a hug that never came. The strange thing was, I didn't feel bitter. Not anymore. The only feeling left was quiet. The kind of quiet only those who have survived the storm can truly understand. 2 days after the wedding, I was in my office when my assistant told me someone was here to see me. I looked up and there she was. My mother, dressed in a light beige suit, her hair neatly curled, standing right at the doorway. I stood up, not out of formality but out of sheer surprise. "Mom!" I stammered, unable to hide the shock. "Olivia," she nodded. "May I come in?" I motioned toward the chair across from my desk. Of course. I had never seen my mother sit somewhere where I was the one in charge. For as long as I could remember, she'd always held the higher ground. More control, more authority. But today was different. She looked around the room slowly. At the photo of me and Judge Maddox on the wall. At the open federal civil procedure on my desk. And finally, her eyes stopped at the nameplate. Honorable Olivia Grant. "This place is nice," she said. "Professional." I simply nodded, not sure what to expect. "I heard. Everyone at the wedding wanted to take pictures with you," she said slowly. "Uncle Russell came back bragging about the photo he got standing next to you." I said nothing. She went on. "Honestly, I don't really know how to start this," she said, her hands folded tightly in her lap. "I know. You and I haven't really seen each other in almost a decade." I gave a small nod. 9 years. She gave a sad smile. "Right. 9 years. And every year that passed I kept telling myself, you needed time. I needed time. But eventually I realized, time doesn't fix anything by itself." I looked at her, the woman who had once coldly shut me out of a family dinner, who turned her back when I was suspended, who said nothing when my brother called me a disgrace. The woman who believed that a daughter studying law was something to be ashamed of. "I used to think staying silent was the best way to avoid conflict," she said, her eyes now soft with regret. "But now I see my silence killed something between us." I still didn't speak. Jason told me. "You didn't say a word, just left quietly. He said he didn't expect you to be so calm." I gave a faint smile. "Because I've learned one thing. Not every battle needs to be won with words. Some fights, silence is the most powerful response." She looked at me, her eyes slightly red. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," she said. "I know there's nothing I can say to erase what I didn't do, what I let happen. But I want you to know, I'm proud of you." I exhaled quietly. Those 4 words, "I'm proud of you," had once been the thing I craved more than anything in this world. Now, hearing them didn't make me break down. They came like a soft breeze, but left a lasting echo. "You've lived with such strength, Olivia," she continued. "I don't know how you made it through those years, but you did something even the strongest in our family never dared to do." I nodded, and for the first time looked at her without pain. "I don't need you to be proud," I said slowly. "I just need you to know, I was never the disgrace." She nodded instantly without hesitation. "I know." A long silence passed between us. No one said anything. But there was no need anymore. For the first time in 9 years I walked my mother to the door myself. Not out of politeness, but because I had truly closed a chapter. Not with revenge. Not with recognition. But with the calm of someone who no longer needs acceptance to know their worth. I don't know exactly when I stopped waiting for an apology. Maybe it was the night I signed the sentencing order for a man convicted of child abuse, knowing justice had been served. Maybe it was the morning I received word of my official appointment as a trial court judge for Fulton County, without a single family connection involved. Or maybe it was when I walked out of my office that afternoon after my mother left, and realized my heart no longer felt heavy, not because she said she was proud, but because I no longer needed to hear it to feel whole. A few weeks later, I received a handwritten letter. Not from my mother. Not from Jason. From my father. His handwriting was still slanted and firm, just like the old notes he used to leave on the fridge. Out in the garden back tonight. But this time the words weren't cold. Olivia, your mother told me about your conversation at your office. Jason mentioned a few things about the wedding. I read an article about you in last week's Georgia Law Journal. You've gone farther than anyone in this family ever imagined. I didn't know how to be a father to a daughter like you. You're stronger, tougher, and brave enough to do what's right when everyone else stayed silent. Maybe the night you walked away, you weren't the one giving up. Maybe you were the only one who knew how to stand up. Sorry. And I'm proud of you, Dad. I read the letter once. Then again. By the third time I cried. Not because I needed his forgiveness, but because I never thought I'd live to see a day like this. The day when all the things I kept silent for 9 years were finally acknowledged. The following week, I went back to the old house in suburban Marietta. The house I was kicked out of on a rainy night, suitcase in one hand and an old canvas bag in the other. My father opened the door. His hair was grayer now. He didn't say anything, just stepped aside and held the door open. My mother was in the kitchen, her back to us, arranging pastries on a plate. No one said sorry again. No one brought up the past. We had dinner like regular people, for the first time in nearly a decade. After the meal, Jason arrived. Tina came with him, a slight roundness already visible beneath her dress. Can you believe it? Tina whispered as she hugged me goodbye. She's going to carry the Grant name, and I want her to know that someone like you is part of it. I looked at her, my chest tightening, not with pain, but with the quiet knowledge that I had broken a cycle. A new generation would grow up without the fear I once lived with. Jason shook my hand. No distance. No resentment. No barbed words like before. Just two people who had lost each other, finding a piece of something still left between them. Back home, I took off my coat, set my bag down on the table and walked to the window. The city glowed under the night sky, traffic flowing steadily beneath the golden lights. I closed my eyes and smiled, quietly. Life never moves in a straight line. Sometimes you have to fall before you learn to rise. Sometimes you have to walk away to find who you really are. I was once the girl labeled the disgrace of the family. I once thought I had to run from everything to survive. But it turns out I just needed to walk toward what I believed in and never stop. Now, I don't need their approval to know I'm enough. I just need me, and that has always been enough. Olivia's story is a powerful testament to the strength it takes to rise above judgment and rejection, even when it comes from your own family. Once labeled a disgrace, she became a judge, not through bitterness, but through resilience and a deep belief in justice. Her journey not only moves us but also inspires us to value courage, self-respect, and the power of standing up for ourselves, even when the whole world turns away. A fitting ending for a heart that never gave up. What do you think of Olivia's journey? Share your thoughts in the comments below, because every story offers a valuable perspective. And don't forget to subscribe for more emotional stories and powerful life lessons about family and self-worth.